moving over to the Pinnacle project.
Yeah.
What was the role that you actually played in the project itself?
Well, I, along with Maurizio Chergol, the chief design naval architect at Fincantieri.
It was a collaborative project then?
It was a collaborative project, but the the way the public space went together, the main configuration ship, the people mover concept, the way of utilizing not only the public rooms but the public areas to create a more comprehensive layout to suit a really sophisticated experience on board, to create something for the passengers that would give them just many more choices. I mean, to me, that was what made cruising great. Is you got on board the ship, you brought your bag, you unpacked, you didn't have to do anything. You went with the flow. If you wanted to go to the midnight buffet, you went to it. If you wanted to go to the disco, but you always had choices. You didn't, there wasn't a program that at 10 o'clock, you go to the ice carving thing, and at 2 in the afternoon, you go for, watch them do this or that.
Right.
There were always choices, and I always felt that the more choices the people had on board, the more, first of all, the ship would be used more efficiently. Everyone wouldn't be in one place. Mm-hmm. And then it suited all the various personalities, likes and dislikes and things like that people had on board. So that ship was the culmination of thinking on my part, and Chergol, did things to create a really interesting look on the outside as well as the hull. Yeah. And we worked really well together to come up with a design that if that ship came out today, it would be totally up to date. I mean, there would be nothing on there that you would look back and say, "Oh, this was conceived 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's old-fashioned." But I have to say, Pinnacle did not develop out of nowhere. It was part of several new concept ships that I had designed, where I just done the whole layout of the ship, with the cabins, the public space, and putting in the casings and things that I knew would be necessary to run the ship and make it work, as well as the exiting requirements, fire zone separations, and so forth, all the technical details. So the fact of the matter is, I have a ship model, and I have to go downstairs to get it, of a ship that I designed, maybe 4 or 5 years, beginning to work for Carnival. So I would say, early 80s, trying to come up with a new concept. And ultimately we came up with a great concept for, Ted had the idea that we wanted to do a big ship and, something that would knock everything else out of the water. And I think it was called the Tiffany Project. And I designed a great project. It had 2 towers, not unlike what Royal Caribbean ultimately built.
The Oasis.
The first one they built was 5, 6, 10 years ago. But I'm talking about almost 30 years ago.
Wow.
It was an outstanding ship. And again, it would be a ship that could work today. Mm-hmm. It was a completely different configuration. What we did in the middle was it was open air, so the inside cabins of the 2 towers had balconies looking into really a park with an amphitheater, mm-hmm. and then all the public rooms were below that, and big pool deck covered in the dome and in the bow of the ship. It was quite interesting, and Ted loved it. And we went to the shipyard, and they did the calculation, and I think it calculated to be something like 125,000 tons.
Wow.
Our biggest ship up to that point was 70,000 tons. No, sorry, a little bit bigger than that. Maybe, around 70, 75, 80,000. I don't remember now. And the shipyard, meanwhile, had designed a ship to fulfill that need, and it came out to be 100,000 tons. And the price was affordable, but Ted was afraid that taking that big step in tonnage, he didn't know how logistically it would work on board, if we would be creating a big disaster of getting the luggage around and bringing the food on board and all that stuff. So as much as he loved that project, we took the Fincantieri project, which became the Carnival Destiny. And that was the first ship to be built a passenger ship to be built over 100,000 tons. I was in the Guinness Book of Records as being the architect for the first ship to be built over 200,000 tons. So we had that, so that was a predecessor to the Pinnacle. And there were a couple of others in between that, trying to sort of knock the socks off the market and the competitors. And then ultimately we came to the next Ted Harrison inspired move to create a new and fabulous project. And again, it was the Pinnacle project. We studied all of the real technical requirements, and the proposal we had on the table was a real ship. It was the engines were in it, and the people mover design was in it. We talked to the people that would supply these things, and they calculated a real price. And they say timing is everything. Well, timing is what screwed us on that project, because it between the time we started designing it and between the time the price was calculated, the euro started going up, and that swing on the euro dollar ratio is what ultimately sank the project. Ted had very strict guidelines on how much he wanted to pay or what he thought would be profitable on costing so much per lower berth, and this ship exceeded that.
Right.
So it died. We did a similar project, a bit smaller and a bit less details with Ferner Massa yards, which I think we called the Next Generation, which was a great ship, but it wasn't as great as the Pinnacle. Pinnacle was really, in my view, outstanding. It was, probably my biggest professional disappointment that project wasn't built. It took even the funnel. I had developed the funnel design for Carnival, and then when we did the Spirit class, I created the funnel on top of the atrium and made the front part of the funnel red glass, to be part of the livery of the funnel and giving it a very unique shape. I took this to a new level with the Pinnacle project. It would have been just an amazing piece of sculpture and function. And so, but again, all these, if a project doesn't get built, it's just lines on paper.
Right, yeah. While creating the Pinnacle project, what were some of the challenges that were faced?
Well, as a designer, you would like to do absolutely everything.
Right.
The sky's the limit.
Right.
But however, being a practical architect and working for Carnival already at that time, 20 years, let's say, or close to it, I knew that this thing had to be built. So the challenge is to create all these, what have come to be known as wow features in a envelope that could be built,
right.
That was affordable. And we did. We were successful. Had it not been for the euro going up, we Carnival would have 3 or 4 of these ships now,
really?
At least.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was, that was the particular irony. So, so it's creating something like that is an intuitive process of, I always like to call it as a 4-dimensional puzzle or, crossword or something like that, where you can't think in terms of plans. You have to think in terms of plans, elevation, and the movement of people throughout the ship. And that's where the 4th dimension comes in. So it's not just a matter of sketching out a GA plan and then making elevations and sections. Where one room is, where the next room is, the spatial and traffic plans of getting from one to the other, the visual aspect and the feelings that are generated in the people is, that's what separates or creates individualism in the people that design these things. Everyone sees things in a different way. And again, I was so totally lucky because Ted Arison or Mickey Arison never interfered in that. They didn't say, "Oh, I got a great idea. Let's do this," and so forth.
Right.
And I can tell you, in my career prior to working for the Arisons, that was that was a real exception. Most developers and big shots have their their own ideas, and
right.
they have an ego that pushes those ideas and uses an architect or a designer as a tool.
Right.
Ted and Mickey were not like that at all. They looked at me, as well as their other top executives, as the people they put in charge of doing these things. They looked at the big picture, and they had people doing this, that, or the other thing. It would be like, if the owner of, let's say, a hospital went into the surgery and told the surgeon how to do the work.
Yeah.
I didn't suffer from that. I was hired as hopefully the best surgeon, and they gave me the complete facilities to do what I wanted. And as long as I wasn't creating malpractice suits for them in terms of cost overruns and things like that, it was a perfect relationship. They didn't have to worry about it.
Right.
They did worry, of course, but in the end they did.
While creating the Pinnacle, you mentioned there being other projects after and before.
Yeah.
For the Pinnacle project itself, how many designs do you think it went through until you came up with the finalized one towards the end?
It's one design. It was a process. You start off and you make. I'm old school. I didn't work on a computer. I worked on paper.
Right.
With pen and ink and scales and you start off sketching, making simple one-line little drawings, and thinking of the process as thinking of ideas that's going to make that into something. It isn't just a matter of arranging a bunch of public rooms. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of trying to understand the experience that you want to create on board for the passenger and that they will feel. For example, one of the biggest things I did in my work with Carnival over the years was to develop the big atrium. My atrium, let's say on the Fantasy, which was our first atrium, it was not the first atrium ever built on a ship. There had been so-called atriums, but this is one that went from the main public room deck all the way to the top of the ship with a glass dome. And I felt that when you analyze the experience of people getting on board a ship, coming down to a cruise, they go through the hassle of flying usually, and then the hassle of getting their luggage and going from the airport to the cruise port, then the hassle of getting their luggage and giving it to a stevedore and going through the check-in line and so forth, and then you ultimately end up walking down an extended gangway, a narrow thing, and looking at this gigantic ship on the quayside. And it's kind of a bad feeling, and I felt like, and my experience with the older ships, that once you came in that small shell door mm-hmm. and came into this tight space, I felt like, instead of capturing the excitement that these people felt when they bought their ticket to go on the cruise, that you've induced them to more hassle. So I wanted to make sure that when people passed through that small shell door and done all those egregious things, that they came into this wondrous space that right. drew them in like a magnet, and the excitement began right at that moment once they stepped off the gangway and were into the ship. And that was a great feeling, and so that's the root behind creating the plan. It happens organically. You don't just say, "Oh, I didn't have a preconceived idea. I had things that I wanted to add, restaurant choices, entertainment choices, intimate spaces, big spaces, and things in between that, again, would allow people to have the freedom to create the kind of cruise that they would like to have. I thought that was really, really important, and that the ship was complex enough in layout as well as design and materials that kept their interest up during the whole period of their cruise, so they never got used to the ship. They were, on the last day of the cruise, they're still discovering things, and right. I think that led to when they left the ship thinking, I wouldn't mind doing this again. So that's the secret.
There's a lot of striking features of the Pinnacle. Like you mentioned, the people mover system, the different water slides. Could you walk me through some of the unique features that people may not even have known just from the preview video?
Well, the people mover, I came up with that concept to solve two problems. I felt and always have felt that a big ship, in and of itself, that notion is a negative, unless you can make that big ship have things that nothing else has, that only a big ship could afford to do. And also, and especially in a ship of this size, which would have been the biggest in the world at the time, I could envision, Mary saying to Frank, let's go on a cruise on this ship. I mean, how many people on it? 5,000? Oh, no way, too big. I don't want to, And so I wanted something that could immediately vitiate that argument. And I thought the people mover would do it. Let's create something that would, it was, let's say it's a glorified elevator in a way.
Yeah.
That it would be something that, you can get around the ship with the people mover. So I conceived that the people mover would, not just be something that went around the ship, but it went up and down as well. Mm-hmm. And then it also became a real wow feature because it did a complete circuit at the top of the ship. So here you were hanging over the side of the ship, getting this great view, going around, stopping at various stations to pick up or drop off people. And then at one point, midship on the starboard side, that car and rail stopped, and then it went down to the main public room deck. And we'd go aft and forward and then back up again. So we, in our little office, this guy Petu, Finn, who worked for me, we created a little animation, long before we had any animation hardware, of just, watching the little ship thing, the cars go up and down and around and so forth. And it became something that I felt would solve the bigness question and create a wow feature at the same time. So, so that was one thing. Then we created a room. Then we had the big open deck at the main public room level, which we made really wide to make it a real open deck. And we introduced things like the lazy river. People could sit in a big tube and go around, and we put in a tractor in it to go up and down. Then the huge cannonball water slides. Probably something that most people didn't get was that we created a room that came in from that deck that you could pass through, and it was a room that had I don't remember how many decks high it was, but we envisioned doing an aerial like Cirque du Soleil show in that room, but it also could be something that people could do, rock climbing and things like that, and sort of an adventure situation that really would be something that, not just something where they hooked you up to a rope and pulled you up, so to speak. I always try to get some sort of feel of authenticity in things that somehow grasps a reality, and a reality, if it's coming from something else, like let's say rock climbing, that has a sense of reality to it, not just a show, so to speak.
Right.
And we had an amazing health club. We had a great room for kids and teenagers, and again, I mentioned the big funnel that was designed for there. Of course, we had a fabulous restaurant in there, and then the water slides that we created a mountain with caves in it with waterfalls, and the water slide would go in and out of the cave, and again, just to create adventures that would be great in a big landside hotel.
Yeah.
that or water park or something like that. So there was no, the limitations again were self-imposed in not creating something, that would be out of sight, too expensive to build, because again it would go nowhere, and I knew that. And the success was that we had a very affordable price in euros. However, the translation to dollars, which is where the income was put, increased the percentage of the cost, which again killed the project.
Right.
Not through lack of wanting to do it. Everyone, when I remember a meeting where we showed the video to the top executives from Carnival and how excited everyone was. And that was also part of my design work, is to not only excite the passengers or guests, but also to excite the Carnival people that run it, that sell it, and so forth. And it was all go. So it was only money.
Really? So the project was pretty close to being actually built then. Were there any other factors that brought down the project, or was it really just the economics of? To the
best of my knowledge, it was the total cost.
Really,
and principally, which drove it over the edge, was not the design, but the the euro ratio.
Mm-hmm.
But because there were price indications. We didn't just work on the project and then unwrap a box with Ted Harrison and say, "Oh, here it is." This did go step by step in a way.
Right.
Although, but Ted again, he had that ability to look at something very quickly, and if there was nothing that bothered him, that he stood out as either something stupid or something he thought was ridiculous or too expensive. So it was a very smooth operation, as every every design of every ship that I had done. Of all the cruise ships that I had designed, all the public rooms, I only had to change one design of one disco on one ship.
Really?
Many, many years ago. And it was not because he didn't like it. It was because it was a disco on one of the Fantasy class ships, and I had come up with an idea of creating an inferno. There was a song, Disco Inferno, that was really big, so I had simulated fires and, sort of a Hades. And Ted loved it, but he was superstitious, and he thought, you don't want to do anything that would somehow invoke the idea of fires. That's why I had to change that design. So...
I know you touched on this a little bit before, but from my understanding, there was another project Carnival had developed years prior with like you said, the split structures.
Yeah.
Much similar to the Oasis class ships that are sailing now. Were the ideas from that project ever taken in and utilized in the Pinnacle project?
Yes and no. Not something you could point your fingers and say directly this or that.
Right.
Because again, there was a good bit of time between those two ships, and things that seemed, for example, that ship with the two towers. I had come up. We were basically a 7-day cruise ship. So I created 7 restaurants. So you would eat at a different restaurant every night.
Mm-hmm.
Wait staff would move around with you, so your same waiter would be there. So one night it would be Italian, rather than changing the menu, change the restaurant and create a little more intimacy and so forth. That concept we didn't carry that through to the Pinnacle project, for example. We just, by that time, there'd be more specialized restaurants. Our scope of vision at the time I created that ship was a little bit different. You crawl before you walk and walk before you run and so forth. So we were still in the walking stage, I would say, at that point. Although again, the ship was great, and I still love the 7 restaurant concept.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that ship died because. Now it sounds so ridiculous. 120,000. It sounds like a medium-sized ship, but then it was it was almost double the size of what we had, and I can understand, but worked it out logistically. Even when we did the Destiny, which was 100,000 tons, I mean, we worked very carefully, particularly on stores and baggage handling, and we created this corridor inside the ship on the crew decks, which everyone called I-95, and where everything was moved. And it turned out, of course, when the ship was done, all the worrying disappeared because the ship worked like a clock.
Right.
In fact, it was easier to get the luggage to cabins, rather than people waiting till, let's say they boarded the ship and the ship sailed at 4 o'clock, rather than them getting their luggage at 7 or 8 or 9. They had usually, most of the time, their luggage was already at the room when the time they got there.
Wow.
And that comes from, the kind of planning that was done beforehand and thinking. Mm-hmm. I mean, everyone that was involved in the creation of these ships were real professionals. They understood cruising. They understood what the problems were. Knowledge gained through experience.
Right. This is a little more of an opinion one, but Royal Caribbean now has the 3 Oasis-class ships.
Yeah.
And the ideas for those were clearly adopted by what you said you had a long time before then, with the split structure and those ideas. What's your opinion of the Oasis class ships now? Do you think Carnival could have done it better if they had proceeded with their idea?
Of course. Here's my main criticism of those ships. I feel, and I've always felt, still do, mm-hmm. that if you're a passenger on board, you want to always feel connection with the sea. And in those ships, you're in a mall.
Right.
That's my opinion. There's almost no connection with the sea when you're in the public room areas, when you're in the main, whatever they call the atrium, it was poorly conceived in the respect of, basically the people that have cabins that face in. My understanding is, and I only sailed on one for a day or I think overnight for a charity thing. Mm-hmm. They have to close their curtains because the people, there's thousands of people down in the atrium looking up at the cabin. So, what fun is that? And the way that the ship that I had designed with the Twin Towers, it was outside space. So although there would be people down at the lower level, it wouldn't be thousands of people. It would, since it was really an outdoor space, you'd get a few people out there and enjoying. And I think the whole feeling would be completely different.
Right.
Also, the ship that I had designed didn't cant in, so it didn't make it even easier for people to see, and it was basically vertical. Although I have to say, I designed the last ship that I designed, which I worked on when we were finishing up the Costa Diadema, which was my last ship built. I created a project to build a modern cruise ship with features like that had this huge efficiency of public space to cabin space, so that I did that in a way of double usage of space, creating fantastic spaces that again would be used more efficiently. On ships, quite often a room, a lot of rooms would not be used at all during the day.
Right.
Rooms like the theater would only be used for one brief period. So I created this GAP that created a fantastic ship with wow features and so forth, but yet the rooms were designed and the spaces were designed in such a way that they would be constantly being used. Mm-hmm. So therefore you needed less public space, which is the most expensive space to build on board the ship, but still you wouldn't get the feeling of, the passenger wouldn't get the feel of, my God, the ship is small or everyone is crowded in, because the spaces that were added were multifunctional, were bigger. Mm-hmm. But then we didn't, so we had no theater, so to speak, because the main area of the ship could be used as a theater at that particular time, but still allowing other things to function around it. So it's quite a challenge, but the people in charge didn't have the vision to really look into this in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
And it was no one asked me to do it. I just did it.
Right. Yeah. So to end this off, do you think Pinnacle would ever be dug up again? Maybe switched around a little bit, add and take away some features. Do you think Carnival would ever consider building anything to that scale or anything resembling the Pinnacle that you drew up?
Well, I would say probably not, but anything could happen. The whole environment today of shipbuilding is so different. And you see it in the new ships. They're so boxy and just they scream efficiency. But you don't have the challenge is not to be just efficient and make it as simple as possible. The challenge is to make it exciting and efficient, and things that can actually work and create some excitement. So now. The whole philosophy has changed, I think, in terms of, the concept of the ship being the destination has morphed into more or less copying features that are on hotels and things like that. And, I think that's sad because, the ship has the great advantage of being at sea. There's nothing like looking out from an open deck and seeing nothing but horizon around you. And when you lose that, and again, that's my criticism of the Oasis ships, apart from being on the open deck, you lose that. I mean, if you look at the amount of open deck on that ship, Oasis, it's pitiful. I don't know how it actually functions because as tonnage goes up, the area of the profile of the ship looking down from the top, the plan, doesn't increase proportionally.
Right.
Because it's, one is a square factor, the other is a cubic factor. And the challenge, and that's what Pinnacle did. We did these amazing decks on the side of the ship at deck 5 or 6, whatever it was, that allowed us to have a proportional amount of open deck, which we thought was, and I still think is fundamentally important on a cruise ship. You don't want to feel packed in. You want to have communion with the sea.
Right.
You want to, you want the excitement. You want if you're going to lay on a deck chair and just watch the world go by, it's great to be able to see the sea and have enough space to be in the location you would like to be in the sun, out of the sun, up there, down here, and I think that. Everything is a compromise, of course, but I think this ship, Pinnacle, had much less compromises. But the direction that I see, and not that I'm following it like a like someone who's totally interested in their whole world revolves around cruise ships. It's. I wouldn't get involved. In fact, the fact of the matter is that. I could have done actually 2 more ships for Costa. They were building 2 ships for Asia, which I think the project has been canceled ultimately. But they wanted me to do it. But they did this. They created other architects, German architects created a GA with the shipyard that was so unimaginative. They tried to take things out of this big project that I had designed and put it in, but it was a joke. And I felt to myself, well, I don't want to commit myself for another 5 years to a project that won't be anything exciting.
Right.
Just to do new decorations and new ideas and new lighting. That wasn't enough for me. I felt like, like a pro athlete that retires, a baseball player. Their last hit before they retire should be a home run. And that's what I felt that I wanted to do. And I just turned it down. I didn't need the money. And I certainly didn't need the aggravation and the stress.
Right.
So that pretty much ended my career in building ships.
So, I mean, if Carnival were ever to call you up and say, hey, we want to revive the project of the Pinnacle, would you ever go back and...
Well, what I would do in that case, because I've thought about it, I talked to Mickey, and I would be a consultant. I wouldn't do the whole thing. I would try to oversee creating something that was, that really had the excitement that was at the cutting edge of the evolution of what has been done in the construction and design of cruise ships, getting more back to basics. Again, communion of the sea, if nothing else, is a basic for me. And I've got that in me. I would like to do it, but I don't want to go, getting on an airplane every couple of weeks and flying to Europe and going through the jet lag and sitting through meetings and checking hundreds of drawings. And it's not enough years left in my life to do that anymore.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate you coming on Canceled and talking to me about the Pinnacle.